Is Shane Wright ready to take on a bigger role? I'm also going to tell you why tanking is the best way to bring a Stanley Cup back to Seattle as we look ahead to the weekend.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm Zane Beg, and I'm hosting solo today in place of Erica L. Ayala. And I want to get into some interesting things going on with Shane Wright and Chandler Stevenson. So Chandler Stevenson left the game late in the second period against Minnesota on Wednesday and did not return. Coach Bylsma did not elaborate what the injury was, how serious it was, didn't even say if it was upper or lower or mid or out-of-body injury. We don't know. Unless he is absolutely required to, Coach Bylsma, as most hockey coaches aren't going to give away injury information. He didn't return in the third period is what we did know. And it was interesting because Shane Wright had kind of felt like he's been a little bit in the doghouse, and maybe he still is. He got a bizarrely low amount of ice time against Montreal last week in Seattle, and was even asked about it, why he was moved to the fourth line, which isn't the same as not having ice time, but the two things were related. And Coach Bylsma said, well, you're the one that's calling it the fourth line. Basically, he's saying to the media that, like, this fourth line designation is meaningless. But that's not really true, because Shane Wright has been put on the line with whoever the leftovers are. Right now, it's Michael Eyssimont and John Hayden. Before it was Ted Kartye. It's just whoever gets the leftovers. That's what Shane Wright is right now. And so when Chandler Stevenson got hurt, it was Shane Wright that got the majority of ice time, and he was moved up from the Eyssimont and John Hayden line, and he was like mixing with different line combinations during the third period. They were kind of haphazard. It wasn't like he was promoted to a specific line. Now that we will know what the lineup is going into the game, presumably, then they can have set line combinations. And I'm really interested to see where Shane Wright ends up, because he had 19 minutes and 54 seconds of ice time, which is a career high. He also did set a career high the previous game against Chicago with 17 minutes and 42 seconds. And so it's like the coaching staff went from, okay, we don't trust you to get as much ice time, and we're putting you on the fourth line. And now they are giving him more ice time. And against Chicago, it was still on the fourth line. And now against Minnesota, it's even more ice time, but now he's been moved up to wherever he can fill in on different line combinations. With the line combinations set, I'm very interested to see what happens, especially if Chandler Stevenson is out of the lineup. And I don't really understand the thinking here. Shane Wright has been the best player on the team, just period. At least the best forward. There's a good case for Brandon Montour and Joey Decord, but certainly the best forward. I think Shane Wright has been just the best. He's good offensively. He's very detailed defensively. He can play in special teams. He does everything well. He has a really high hockey IQ. He uses his body to shield the puck from defenders. I remember during training camp, the young players for the rookie camp, they talked about Shane Wright and how detailed he was, and what an example that he set. He doesn't seem to have any attitude problems. He seems real positive. He seems like a real hard worker. I don't know why he isn't getting more runway. Maybe he parked in Dan Bilesma's parking spot, as offered. The only plausible theory that I've seen offered by anyone in Kraken media, put up by Glenn Dreyfus. So parking spot theory is the prevailing theory right now, because nothing really makes any more sense. And I think it's also important to talk about Chandler Stevenson's injury and what that means. Look, the underlying numbers for Stevenson have been very poor. We've talked about it on the show. Erica's talked about it. I've talked about it on the show with Erica. I know that he is, I think he's leading the league in points. And you look at the stat sheet and you say, well, he's one of the best players on the team. And I think a lot of his production has been sort of empty calorie, in that the impact that he is making on the ice, by just looking at the box score numbers and the assist numbers, doesn't really translate, or hasn't translated well, to what is the team actually winning. And I think a lot of that has to do with all of the stuff that happens that doesn't show up on the box score. Chandler Stevenson's defense has just been very poor. The turnovers, the inability to get the puck out of the zone when trapped in the zone. And there was a real brutal stretch for about 15 or 20 games this year where it felt like every time the Kraken were hemmed in their own zone for a minute or more, Chandler Stevenson was on the ice. And his numbers, his on-ice numbers, and have reflected that. I remember, I think, like, kind of the microcosm, or if you want to just like distill what I've seen from Chandler Stevenson this season into one play, was not the most recent game against Winnipeg, but if you recall, a couple months ago, I believe in early January, the Kraken, the game was tied, and with it was under a minute to go, might have been even under 30 seconds. The puck took a weird bounce off the stanchion, and then it was just kind of like hanging out there. It was a really weird, unfortunate bounce, and then one of the Winnipeg players jumped on the puck and scored, and then the Jets won, and the Kraken didn't even get a point going to overtime. But the thing that really stood out to me on that play was that Chandler Stevenson is just looking at the puck. He's just standing there and going like, oh man, boy, I hope somebody gets to that, because that'd be really bad if someone just jumped on that and scored. I know he has like a real laid back, lackadaisical sort of personality here, and maybe it's unfair to call him lackadaisical. Maybe it's just how he is, but there never seems to be much urgency when he's on the ice. And I think he's a phenomenal passer, but I think that there is a lot missing from his game that's not showing up in the score sheet. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, not just for the next game or throughout the rest of the season, but in the coming years. The Shane Wright, Matty Beniers, Chandler Stevenson center issue, and then Berkeley Catton, who was drafted last year and who was also a center. He's going to be entering the mix too. So, a lot remains to be seen. And I'm really, really fascinated by that part of this game on Saturday. So, but I also want to talk about coming up next about whether or not it's even good if Seattle wins or if tanking is the right thing for Seattle.
Did you know getting a good night's sleep is the #1 recipe for long-term success in life? I didn't. It took me way longer to realize than I'd like to admit. It was years of tossing and turning. I was always tired. I never felt like I could live up to my potential, but not anymore. Thanks to Bear Mattress. I used their sleep quiz and I matched with the Elite Hybrid. It's perfect for side sleepers like me. Now I wake up energized. I'm getting deeper sleeps and I'm ready to attack the day. No matter how you sleep, Bear Mattress has a match for you with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout for 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
Thank you for making Locked On Kraken part of your daily destination. And I want to now talk about tanking. There's been some talk on this show and throughout every time any team is bad, then the question becomes, well, should teams tank for a better draft position? And I know that Erica would, if she were here, she would say absolutely not. She's not a big fan of tanking. I mean, really, the answer to all of the questions that we have would be solved by the gold draft, which is what the PHWL does, where the teams are out of it, then they play for draft standing, and the teams that win among the losers bracket, then they get a higher draft position, which sounds kind of unintuitive and like, well, you want to reward the bad teams so they get better. But a lot of work has been done and looked in this, and it just turns out that the outcomes are really not that drastically different than a traditional draft lottery, but you just remove the incentive to lose, and it makes for a much better product. But that's not the system we have here with the NHL, so we're going to go with the draft lottery. And look, the Kraken, they are capped out. They have a bunch of middling contracts. The Oliver Bjorkstrand and Jani Gord getting out the books is a start, but there are just a lot of deals where guys just kind of are in the middle class and maybe getting overpaid or maybe slightly underpaid, but there's really not any one or any two players who are just like really popping off. And the Kraken really need transformational talent, because that is how you become a Stanley Cup contender. You drafted transformational talent. And I'm going to use that term a lot in this segment here, because that talent changes everything. If you look at the most successful teams this century in the salary cap era, it's the Chicago Blackhawks. Well, who did they draft? They drafted Patrick Kane first overall, and then Jonathan Toews third overall. So two top three picks. Sidney Crosby was drafted first overall, and Yevgeny Malkin was second overall. He would have been drafted first, but Alex Ovechkin was drafted first overall that year. So transformational talent in Ovi, in Crosby, in Malkin. Steven Stamkos and Victor Hedman were top two picks for the Tampa Bay Lightning in their Stanley Cups. Nathan McKinnon, Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid. The the transformational talents, those are really only available realistically in the top 2 of the draft. And honestly, it's really often just the top 1. Nathan MacKinnon was the only true transformational player from his draft. Steven Stamkos was the only transformational player from his draft. Ovechkin and Malkin were the only 2 transformational players from their draft, and they went 1 and 2. So you need to get a high draft pick if you want to get one of those players, because think about how far the Kraken have to go to be a playoff team. We're not talking about a Stanley Cup contender right now, just a playoff team. And they're near the bottom of the standings. They have not a lot of salary cap room, or they have been capped out this year. And they have so far to go just to be a playoff team. Now, we're not talking about contending or realistically contending for a championship. That's an even further gap that they have to do. So now, if you want to win a Stanley Cup, the Kraken are really far from that. I think that's a pretty safe thing to say. And the thing you don't want to do is you don't want to be a team that wants to who's just competitive. We're competitive every year, and they make the playoffs, and then they don't do anything. Like, don't be Minnesota, right? Minnesota, they make the playoffs most years. They're competitive. They're in the mix every year. Sometimes they make a playoff series interesting, but they've only played in 1 conference finals in their history, and that was in 2003. They've never made a Stanley Cup finals. They've never been a Stanley Cup contender, ever. They have never been anything more than just a team that makes the playoffs and then is a first or second round exit every single year. And that is all they are, and that's all they will ever be, as long as they adopt this strategy of being like, well, we can be middle, and then you draft like a medium draft pick, and then we can surround it. No, you don't want to be Minnesota. You don't want to be the Calgary Flames, and then in a different way, you don't want to be the Detroit Red Wings, who have been trying to make the playoffs, but they're not bottoming out. And I really think you need to bottom out. And I know that the argument against tanking is that it creates a losing culture, which I think there's probably some truth to that. I think coaches and players don't tank. I think front offices and GMs do. So the players they want to play for their next contract. They want to play well. Coaches want to win. So their incentive to try to win. And I don't think that's, I don't fault them for that. And I wouldn't expect anything otherwise. But front offices, they should be looking to bottom out. And I think there's also a false dichotomy between you're trying to win now versus building to win later. I think if you are really truly building for the future, you understand that you're not embracing losing, you're embracing reality. That you need to take maybe 1 step back to take 3 steps forward. Because the Kraken, they spent a lot of money this offseason, and they wanted to be competitive, and they didn't have that losing culture by wanting to tank. And then what happened? They tried to win. They went out and they tried to build a playoff team. And then they tried, but just because they tried doesn't mean you're going to win. And they clearly aren't. So now how did you avoid this losing culture exactly? It's like you're still in the same spot as you were before. If you just have a bad team, then you're going to lose. But if you have a bad team and you're losing with purpose and intentionality to try to get that top draft pick, because that's the thing, that's the only realistic thing that is ever going to get you out of the swamp and get you to Stanley Cup contention. And it's the pursuit of respectability versus the pursuit of excellence. And if you are afraid to bottom out, if you're afraid to embrace short-term pain, then you're never going to go anywhere. It's just, unless you just get really, really lucky. And getting lucky is not a strategy. It's just hope. Hope is not a strategy is what they say. And that's absolutely true. You can't just like hope to accidentally stumble into a cup contender without transformational generational talents, all of which, or most of which, you're never finding outside of the top of the draft. So I think then this approach also in the long run provides more pain than if you just rip the Band-Aid off and go with like a strategic, concentrated rebuild. Because what is more painful? Okay, you had 3-4 bad years, and then really bad years, and then they draft some star, and then they draft another star the next year, and now you win a championship, right? Or you're contending for a championship, or you at least you are on path to contend for a championship, or you have no hope, and you're just like, well, maybe they'll do something in the playoffs, but they aren't ever equipped to make a deep run because of the way rosters are constructed in the NHL. You need superstars to win championships. That's true in every sport. It is very, very hard to win without superstars. And you're not getting superstars anywhere except at the top of the draft. So what is the way to win a Stanley Cup? If your team is bad, you should be tanking. You absolutely should be tanking. Because I don't care that much about 5 years in a row where they make a first or second round exit, or 5 out of 7 years where they make a first or second round exit. That is not, I guess that's better than just like being really, really bad. But if that's your ceiling, that's not very exciting. I want the ceiling to be watching the team lift the Stanley Cup and then going to the parade and watching them, screw up traffic on I-5, and everyone is really, zazzed out, and it's not freezing like it was for the Seahawks parade, because that was in the winter, and a Kraken parade would be in the summer, and it would be perfect weather, and everyone would have just a great time. I want that. I want to hug strangers. I want to high five people and say, wow, isn't that great? Wow, the Kraken just won the Stanley Cup. Who are the defending Stanley Cup champions? The Seattle Kraken. That's crazy. Wow. That's what I want. I don't want just like, oh man, well, yeah. Minnesota Wild, well, they made some noise a little bit. No, not a conference finals, but maybe next year they'll make a conference finals. It's been 20 years. It's been 20 years. Do you want this? Is this the fate you want for the next 20 years? No, it's not the fate that I want. Tanking is the way to go. Whew. Well, I got all riled up. So, coming up next, we are going to look forward to the rest of the schedule and what tanking means in the context of that, and what the Kraken need to do or don't need to do, depending on where you fall on this tanking argument this weekend. Daylight savings snuck up on us again. And if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5-Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I know for me personally, the games at Climate Pledge Arena, the home Kraken games, they can run pretty late, especially if they sometimes have like a 7:30 start. And it's a lot of work, you know? I mean, hockey games are super fun, but they can be really exhausting. And it is not uncommon for me to swing by the store, swing by the 7-Eleven on the way there, pick up a 5-Hour Energy, and it just keeps me going, keeps me feeling refreshed. And that's the truth. So, head over to 5hourenergy.com, 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store because they are everywhere. Stock up energy and stay energized. So the Kraken, they are in the middle of a little bit of a break, a little bit of a rest period. They play Edmonton tomorrow, and it is their only game in a 5-day span. And I think you're really starting to see the fatigue. I mean, it's late in the season, and fatigue is just going to be a thing. Joey Decourt, I think, was fatigued after getting a lot of starts, and his performance really suffered. He had a real bad stretch there. Grubauer came in, stopped the bleeding a little bit. And then Joey's last start against Winnipeg was good, right? And then he was also good against Chicago. So I am interested in seeing what the team looks like with just a little bit of rest. Maybe they're just gassed, and that's why they weren't able to generate any offense against Minnesota, especially on the second day of a back-to-back, which, by the way, the Kraken are 0-11 the second day of the back-to-backs. So maybe it's a conditioning thing. Who knows? Or randomness. It's truly a mystery why they really struggle so much on day two. But the thing I'm also really interested in is what happens with Shane Wright, and especially if Chandler Stevenson is out. Will Shane Wright get promoted to that line, this Chandler Stevenson line? Who are his line mates? And then the thing that I also wonder is if Coach Bilesma is sheltering Shane Wright and keeping him away from the really tough matchups. So Minnesota, they had their entire top line was out injured. And against Chicago doesn't really have much talent at all. So there's really no line you're scared about. And I wonder if there's some sheltering of Shane Wright here. Now, tomorrow is maybe not the best opportunity because Leon Draisaitl, he missed the game with an undisclosed injury. I think it was an upper body injury. And then Connor McDavid, he left the game with an upper body injury and didn't return. So we don't know if we're going to see either of them or both of them. And but if, let's say, Stevenson can't play, but McDavid and Draisaitl can, is Shane Wright going to get those matchups going up against Connor McDavid and going up against Leon Draisaitl? Or are they going to give those minutes to, Matty Beniers and Jared McCann and let them take the tough matchups? I think Shane's ready. I think he should be getting more involved with the team and the offense and just the time he's out there more. I think it's kind of ridiculous that he's just being thrown in with whoever's left over on the fourth line. And this is a really good opportunity to prove to the coaching staff that they're making a mistake by keeping him suppressed. Free Shane. Shane Wright is a beautiful gazelle that needs to roam free, and the Kraken coaching staff have him shackled right now. And I want him to roam free like a. Well, I said gazelle, but I was gonna say racehorse. So we're mixing metaphors. It's fine. They're all animals. One of the other things I want to look at is Yanni Nyman's play. So he immediately joined the NHL and then got time on the power play and then scored a power play goal on his first game. And he almost scored a second one, or rather he hit the post early in the game and then he actually scored later. His one-timer is probably the best on the team, and it might not be close. Like Ellie Tolvanen's is very good, but Yanni Nyman's is like there's like a vapor trail when he shoots the puck there. Puck just gets on his stick like super like quick on and off, and then it's gone. It's really, really impressive. The thing that made him an interesting prospect and the reason why he wasn't drafted in the first round is because his skating is just it's not great. And you can tell that he is kind of laboring when he skates. It's not very efficient. There's a lot of wasted movement, wasted motion when he does skate. And he is going to be, he is up with the Kraken and with Jessica Campbell, who is one of the best skating coaches in the world. And so that doesn't, I don't think it hurts him to be up with the club in that regard. But it is interesting to see how he can kind of figure out how to use his size and his shot and try to turn that into something that's workable into an NHL game, because he's a big boy and he lays the body. And it's like, oh, you're faster than me. That's fine. I'll catch up to you in a couple of seconds. And when I do, I'm going to smash you into the boards. So I think that Nyman provides a physical presence that has been sorely lacking on this team. And I think the game that he brings is not something that I would have necessarily said, oh, this is what the Kraken are missing. But seeing him in action, seeing him play, it does feel like, oh, Seattle really needs this. And he is providing, at least on the power play, a real spark. His 5-on-5 numbers isn't great. They aren't great. Again, I think a lot of that has to do with his skating, and he just isn't able to get to the spots. He's just a hair slow, and that's really kind of all you need in order to seed expected goal share. But he is and has been an incredibly intriguing prospect. And now that he's in the NHL, now that he's playing games with Seattle, he continues to be intriguing. So, and then last, I just want to look at, so on this subject of the schedule, the Kraken do have the fourth remaining most difficult schedule. You got Dallas twice and Vegas and the Kings twice and the Oilers, and it's a tough stretch. It's a tough stretch. And that is probably good if your team tank. And, we know where I stand on this, because really this draft is 4 deep. If some drafts, they're top 1 or top 2, but talking to people who really follow the draft more closely, this is a 4 deep draft. If the Kraken can end up in the top 4, they're all roughly kind of in the same tier. And as you can see, Seattle really they need to lose a fair bit. Buffalo has played 3 fewer games, which is good. I think allows them to maybe accumulate some points, and Nashville's 2 fewer games, etc. But this winning has to stop. It has to stop. I am fine if they make the games interesting and competitive, but a regulation loss for every game, or all the possible games you can get, a regulation loss is just the best thing for the Seattle Kraken long term. So, it's an interesting spot. I think it's a really interesting spot. I think it's an interesting game this weekend, and I think the Kraken have some interesting decisions to make. So I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. So thank you for listening to Locked On Kraken. You can also check out the Locked On NHL podcast, which brings you daily league-wide stories. You can find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And for Locked On Kraken, I'm Zane Beg, and I will see you next time.